Are you looking for ways to strengthen your marriage? Would you like to raise children you enjoy being around? Do you long for a peaceful, orderly home that's a blessing to everyone who comes through its doors? Then you've come to the right place. I'm Jennifer Flanders, a Bible-believing, homeschooling mother to 12 and host of the Loving Life at Home podcast. Join me as we discover what God's Word has to say about marriage, motherhood, and minding the things that matter most.
Hello, friend, and welcome to episode 46 of Loving Life at Home. Today is Monday, May 27th, Memorial Day, and our family's heading back home after spending the weekend in San Antonio, attending the RPT, or Republican Party of Texas convention, with a short jog through Dallas, just long enough to cheer the Dallas Mavericks on to victory over the Minnesota Timberwolves in the NBA playoffs last night. My 86-year-old mother went to the game with us, even though it meant missing church last night, which she rarely does, but she herself played basketball in college and has been following the playoffs even closer than we have, so my husband insisted she come along. That was my first NBA game ever, and it was lots of fun. We got to the arena nearly an hour early, so I brought along some needlework to do before the game started, a little quilted pennant banner that spells America, which I plan to hang on my mantle for Memorial Day and keep it up through 4th of July once we get back home. I started working on that at the RPT convention to keep my hands busy and my mind alert during those long caucus meetings and general sessions. I normally keep a small pair of folding scissors in my bag for snipping threads, but when we had left home, I grabbed a very large, very sharp pair of titanium shears instead, which are much better for cutting fabric. Unfortunately, I forgot to take them out of my bag before heading to the convention center in San Antonio, which was about a half-mile walk from our hotel. And since I've had multiple pairs of those tiny little folding scissors confiscated before being allowed to board planes or visit government buildings, I was regretting bringing my good sewing shears to this big event and potentially losing them in similar fashion. But then I spotted some of my fellow delegates walking to the convention center with their open carry holsters strapped around their legs and torsos, and I realized nobody at the RPT convention was going to be one bit worried about my packing a pair of embroidery scissors, no matter how long the blades were. None of us were required to pass through a metal detector or be patted down because the underwire of our bras set off some alarm, which was refreshing. Looking out over that crowd, I was reminded of that scene from Miss Congeniality where Sandra Bullock launches herself off the Alamo stage to tackle a man in the crowd because she glimpsed a gun that was strapped inside his jacket. "We're in Texas," her exasperated handlers explained to her afterwards. "Everyone carries a gun in Texas. My florist has a gun." Contrast that with trying to get into the American Airlines arena for the basketball game last night. We had to stand in a long line and surrender our bags for inspection and pass through a metal detector before we were ever allowed inside that building. But happily, I had wisely left my scissors in the car for that event, and I just used my teeth for cutting threads while we were there. A barbershop quartet sang the national anthem before the game, which was really nice, and all the speeches that we heard back at the convention were very patriotic as well. They reminded us that the freedoms that we enjoy in the U.S. of A., although they were endowed by our Creator, have only been preserved at high cost, and we should all recognize and cherish them as a great heritage that deserves our continued and vigilant protection. I believe all of that wholeheartedly. And so, in honor of Memorial Day, I want to share a couple of my favorite patriotic poems with you today. Both are available as free printables, which I'll link in the show notes. The first is a poem by Edgar called "The Boy Enlists." His mother's eyes are saddened and her cheeks are stained with tears, and I'm facing now the struggle that I've dreaded through the years. For the boy that was our baby has been changed into a man. He's enlisted in the army as a true American. He held her for a moment in his arms before he spoke, and I watched him as he kissed her, and it seemed to me I'd choke, for I knew just what was coming, and I knew just what he'd done. Another little mother had a soldier for a son. When we'd pulled ourselves together and the first quick tears had dried, we could see his eyes were blazing with the fire of manly pride. We could see his head was higher than it ever was before, for we had a man to cherish, and our baby was no more. Oh, I don't know how to say it. With the sorrow comes the joy that there isn't any coward in the makeup of our boy. And with pride our hearts are swelling, though with grief they're also hit, for the boy that was our baby has stepped forth to do his bit. I love that poem for many reasons, not the least of which is the fact that I have a soldier for a son myself. But it's also a good reminder that every man who has ever given his life in service to our country was somebody's son. Every woman was somebody's daughter. Often when we see veterans on the news or meet them in real life, they're old with gray hair and wrinkles, but they didn't look like that when they were first shipped overseas and sent to the front lines, and neither did their fallen comrades. They look more like the teens who sit across from me at the breakfast table every morning, like my married sons and the fathers of my grandchildren, like my daughters who work long hours at the hospital taking care of patients, or my daughters-in-law who spend their days at home training little ones. And it breaks my heart to think of these strong, vibrant young people who have their whole lives ahead of them, laying down those lives in service to their country. But historically, that's how it has played out. That's what has happened. Which brings me to the second poem I'd like to share today, In Flanders Fields by John McCrae. In Flanders fields the poppies blow between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky the larks, still bravely singing, fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields. Isn't that haunting? It was penned by an artillery commander and brigade doctor named Major John McCrae after he had been called upon to conduct a burial service for a fallen comrade. Legend has it that McCrae was dissatisfied with what he had written, so he threw it in the trash. We only know about it today because someone came behind him, pulled it out of the rubbish bin, and circulated it among friends and family members. The poem eventually found its way into a newspaper, and the rest, as they say, is history. I've committed this one to memory, and so have several of my children. Not only is it a historically significant poem and a beautiful song, but it also bears our family's name, and it was written by a man who, like my own dear husband, served his country as an army doctor. Such details make the poem just that much more special to our family. John 15:13 reads, "Greater love has no one than this, that he laid down his life for his friends." And 1 John 3:16 tells us, "This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters." Of course, Jesus exemplified this principle, but so do the men and women we honor every year on Memorial Day. May we never forget that America is the land of the free because of the brave and because of God's blessing. We owe a debt of gratitude to the men and women who have fought to secure and preserve our liberty, and especially to those who laid their lives down on our behalf. In the words of Abraham Lincoln, let us dedicate ourselves to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave their last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain.